Hello and welcome to the Wildcard Rewind podcast. The Combine is in the books. Everybody on X is already going crazy about some players. But first, here's the music.
I just want to rewind to when we were young and hard. Back to all those good times. Take me back to the start.
Oh, yes, it is Monday. We have a full house. We just tried to figure out the last time we actually had a full house on a Monday night, and we think that it may have been 2023. But nonetheless, we are here. We've got a full house. I am joined by the amazing Hannah, who is back with us on a Monday. How are you, Hannah?
Great, thanks, Paul. Super excited to catch up with everyone. It's been a while since we've been together, and we've got a super duper guest, so it's going to be an awesome show.
Yeah, and you've just been talking to us about the fact that you're drafting, so I think you're absolutely bonkers, and you've probably got loads more to do. But yeah, that brings us straight to our other co-host, Lewis. How you doing, mate?
Really good, thank you. Really good. I had a really free weekend, so I got to watch some of the Combine, which was good fun, and always fun to have your partner sort of question why are you just watching men in t-shirts run around with no real context. But it was good fun. I'm doing really well, thank you.
Yeah, maybe after the show you could explain to me on how you explain that to your missus, because I feel like that's a great explanation. But yeah, as Hannah teased, we do have an awesome guest on. We have the best one of the Dynasty wildcard joining us. We have one that actually turns up, unlike last week's guest who didn't bother turning up. We are joined by the amazing Ali, or at FF Dynasty Grill. Ali, how are you doing this Monday night?
I am fantastic. Thank you, Paul. It is an honor to be in the presence of such greatness with you three. Great to see a full house on a Monday night. And yeah, it was great watching the Combine action at the weekend and people overreacting, including myself. And yeah, can't wait to dig into some wide receivers this week.
Yeah, it's gonna be good. We will get straight into the Combine before we start talking about the big news, as that is part of the news. So we'll bring it to you two who actually watched the Combine. I didn't have much time. I have 3 kids and a hectic life on Saturdays, so I didn't really watch much of the Combine. But to you guys who did watch the Combine, how do you think it went? Is there anyone that really stood out to you guys that maybe you weren't looking at before? Is there anyone that you thought, oh, I like what he's doing? Was it a 6'8", 300-pound guy who run a 40 in like 5 seconds, or was it Xavier Worthy who run the 40 in 4.23 or something like that? Talk to us. Is there anyone that you enjoyed?
4.21 for Worthy, which was insane. So I think the big thing for me with the Combine is, like you kind of hinted at, it's great for if there's someone that performs differently to how you expected them to. So if someone comes out and runs much slower or much faster than you thought, then that's great. The really big thing is that there's a lot of double counting going on at the minute. So lots of people that you have a very fast player that goes into the Combine and runs fast, and everyone goes, oh my God, they're fast. And this is the thing, like Xavier Worthy setting the record is obviously really exciting and it's amazing for him. But we did know that Xavier Worthy was fast. Like he's obviously a winner of the weekend and he's someone that's really stood out, but it's not exactly news that he's very quick, especially given that it seems like he lost about kind of 10 to 15 pounds to make sure that he could set the record. And then when it hits his pro day, he'll run a bit quicker. The big ones for me, I've picked out 2. People that stood out to me. One was the running back out of Louisville, previously at Wisconsin, Isaac Garendo. He's a big riser. So 4.3340 at 6 foot, 221 pounds, which is the fastest of any 220-pound running back since 2003. He was someone that I really liked beforehand as a sleeper. So if anything, I'm a little bit annoyed that he's no longer a sleeper. And then the other one to me is actually the other Texas wide receiver, A.D. Mitchell. So ran the 40 at 4.34, which obviously is, 0.13 of a second behind Xavier Worthy, but he's running it at 40 pounds higher. So his percentile speed score was 92nd percentile. Like, it's really elite, which is good to see. And he's the only wide receiver apart from DK Metcalf to run 4.35 or less, having measured in at more than 6'2" and weighing at least 205 pounds. So for him, like, it's obviously really exciting. That's kind of the like freakish level that you're looking at. But yeah, the big thing for me is like you just want to go into the weekend and not stand out as being an awful athlete. And if you're just an okay athlete, that's fine. But these two came in at like really, really freakish athleticism, which is obviously really exciting to see.
Yeah. What about you, Ali? Do you agree with Lewis's picks, or is there others that you enjoyed?
Yeah, so it's mainly just confirming what a lot of people already knew, and it tends to be the winners, the real winners, the people that you haven't done much scouting on or were projected for sort of later rounds that suddenly have pole vaulted themselves up to perhaps day 2, and those are the winners. The other ones for me, there were some running backs that done really well, and to be honest, the combine's more about losers than it is about winners for me, because as Lewis mentioned there, people we know are fast, they're athletic, they come in and do exactly that in the measurements and that. So, but I thought Roma Dunze was a big winner just because obviously Malik Neighbours, Marvin Harrison Jr. not doing anything. Him to come in and do everything. 4.4540, which is more than enough for NFL teams to really be confident in picking him in the top 7 or 8 picks in the NFL draft. He's coming in at 6'3", 212 pounds. That's fantastic. So it just confirms him as a top 10 NFL pick. Then obviously Xavier Worthy, just unbelievable. He obviously came in weighing incredibly light, 165 pounds. So he needed to set the record. Really, he needed to be close to it, and obviously setting it at 4.21 was fantastic. And then tight end as well. I'll give a shout out to tight end Theo Johnson, who come in and he's had the highest RAS score since 1987. So he ran a 4.5740. His leap was 39.5 inch vertical leap at 6'6", 259 pounds, which was crazy. So you sort of compare him to Brenton Strange from last year, who got pole vaulted up to the 2nd round for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Didn't do much for fantasy, obviously, but can pole vault himself up now into that day 2 sort of topic. So it's more about the lower guys, and then probably some losers as well. There's some like Bucky Irving. There were some running backs there that probably didn't help their capital more than what there was winners.
Yeah, Audric Estime being the other big one at running back that kind of really let himself down. The other loser for me that I can't work out how many people are talking about it was Troy Franklin. And I think part of the reason behind that, so the 40 was fine. He actually had the slowest 10-yard split amongst all receivers, and I think it's just a sign to me that like you're hoping with these players that are speed threats, because he did hit a decent miles per hour in the 40, but with a deep threat, you're hoping that they can be someone that, you know, it's lateral agility and quickness, and they can get out the blocks really quickly. And the issue then is that it kind of just shows that it's someone that's fast in a straight line if they can get up to full speed, which obviously is going to be a much lower role in the NFL. And his gauntlet was really embarrassing as well.
It was it was really bad. He was basically running away from the ball to give himself more error for margin when catching it. It was horrendous. Then you put that against someone like Lad McConkey, who was just dead on the line, catching everything perfectly. It's just completely different.
That was 8 minutes 59 that it took Ali to mention Lad McConkey, by the way, if anyone was timing.
But yeah, the other, I just wanted to have a quick mention about Caleb Williams. Obviously, he made some headlines this weekend because he refused to take a medical, and he wasn't obviously working out the combine or anything like that. Do you think, like, I seen a couple of tweets going, oh, he's now dropped in my rankings from 1 to 1 and stuff like that, you know? Does this affect what people think of Caleb Williams more than anything? Do you think people are going to look at him differently because he refused that medical?
No, not personally for me. I think he was he knows that he's going the first overall pick. I think he's absolutely got them guarantees. He knows he's the best quarterback. In my eyes, there is a clear tier to the two behind him. So he's only going to hurt his draft stock by if something happens on the day and he doesn't quite produce what he should produce. There's no reason, or he could suffer some freak injury. So there's absolutely no reason to do it. To be honest, I don't hold it against him. He spoke well when he was doing the questions. I know the ones going around on X from Dustin, the first question that got asked to him are you afraid of going up against you? Which was an absolute terrible question, but he handled it really well.
Yeah.
So for me, it doesn't drop him at all for me.
He's come out and basically said, not all 32 teams can draft me. Like, he knows that he's going first overall. Like, if worst came to the worst, the lowest he could go is number 2 overall if the Bears fell in love with Drake May. So he's basically come out and said, like, I will do medicals when I do my visits, but I decided to not give all 32 teams my personal medical information, which I can kind of understand. Like, there's no reason to go through it with 32 teams when everyone in the world knows that only one team needs that information.
Yeah, that's it. But I know we spoke about this for quite a while now, but I do want to mention some other big news. Obviously, the legend that is Jason Kelsey has announced his retirement. Very emotional watching that video. Absolute legend of the game. But the other big news, Ali, you are wearing his jersey, is Mike Evans got the bag today. He got paid. I tell you what, we'll bring you in, Hannah, because you are in this show, and you haven't had much. We haven't had much to say, So, what do you think of Mike Evans getting paid a 2-year contract, $52 million deal? Do you like him now for fantasy? Do you like him for dynasty? Do you think he's a bit of a buy window for him, or sell, or what?
I mean, I think ultimately they both wanted to get this done, didn't they? And they have managed to do that. Look, we saw what he could do last season with Baker. Obviously, the thing that we're waiting to drop is Baker staying in Tampa, or is he not? And I think until then, I think there's probably still some uncertainty to him. I personally would probably buy him, if the person who owns him is still uncertain about, is Baker going to stay there? I think as soon as Baker signs, I think his price is going to go up again, and you're probably not going to get him cheap anymore. So I think if you're interested in Mike Evans, like, this is your last window to get him cheaper. I think already his value's probably increased a bit because he signed his contract, although ultimately I think we knew he was going to sign somewhere, obviously, but we kind of know what he is in Tampa. We know what he can do with Baker. He surprised, I think, a lot of people this season. Obviously, we'll be talking about it more a bit later on. He's getting older, but ultimately he seems to be maintaining, his fantasy production for now. So, I wouldn't expect to buy him and then want him for another 4 or 5 years. But I think if you want him for a 1-2 year window, then he's a good buy. But as I say, I think as soon as Baker signs, his value is going to go up again, and you've probably lost your cheap window. So I think this is your last chance for a cheap buy. I mean, ultimately he's a veteran; he's going to be cheaper than all of you young guys. But you probably can buy him at a little bit of a discount right now, but not for too much longer. I wouldn't have thought.
100%. Ali, we better bring it to you. Come on, let's play some background love music as you talk about Mike Evans for the next hour and a half. How you feeling about it, mate? How you feeling?
Yeah, absolutely buzzing. I mean, I only bought this jersey halfway through last season, so if it would have been for just half a season, I would have had to probably cry my eyes out to sleep tonight. But I just think, leading on from what Hannah said there, I think he knows that Baker's signing. I don't think he would have announced that deal today had he not been made aware that Baker's also going to be signing. I think they're just dotting the T's, the I's and the T's, or whatever it is. So I think that'll be announced very shortly. And it makes plenty of sense because they really hit it off last year in year one. So I'm excited to see what they can do into year 2. So yeah, it's great, and I agree. He's currently wide receiver 33 on keep trade cut. So I think if you're drafting him, you can get him as say your wide receiver 3. I think that's great value, especially if you're looking to really compete into year 1 and year 2. I think that's really good value, and you probably still trade for him at a reasonable sort of late first round pick in this rookie draft coming up. If you're not quite set on the wide receivers, then that's probably a great price to pay if you're a competitor. So yeah, obviously I'm absolutely buzzing because he's my favorite player in the NFL, and I'm excited just to see that continuation with Baker, who I was really impressed with, especially the second half of last season. So yeah, definitely a happy man tonight.
I 100% agree with you. It was quite a nice little connection they had last year, and it can only get better into year 2, like you said. Lewis, anything you want to add quick on Mike Evans before we move on?
No, I was looking in the background in terms of like trade value, and I think it's quite interesting when you look on KTC that he's in a tier with Stephon Diggs, Devontae Adams, and Cooper Kupp. Because I think for a while he was slightly behind that tier of the older wide receivers, and it's nice to see him sort of being valued in the same as them as well. Because the conversation around him for the last few years has always been like, hey, you can get Mike Evans at a discount, and he can be your wide receiver 1 and redraft, and you can go and win a title. So maybe after last year, we won't get that so much, but I still think he'll be available at a discount when it comes around to draft in September, because people forget about any players over the age of about 28.
Yeah. I just want to say as well, the way that he announced his contract was pretty epic with the "I'm not effing leaving" the video, and it came out that he said to his agent, he texted his agent last night, he wants to retire a Buccaneer. So they got the deal done today, which is just a nice moment for all Tampa fans, because I was absolutely dreading seeing him in a Chiefs jersey and having to go on the show with Mags every week. That would have been absolutely hell.
Matt, I think honestly, if it had come up saying he's signed with the Chiefs, I think if we'd have gone on the Wildcard squad page, it would have gone that Ali's left the group,
100%.
blocked Mags, everything like that, and it's like, Kev, just let me know when Mags is not on, and I'll appear on the show again. Or can I transfer to the Rewind crew, please?
100%. Yeah.
No, I get that feeling. But yeah, so let's move on to what we're talking about this week. This week we're going to continue our reviews of the 2023 season, and we're gonna get into the wide receivers. Last week we spoke about the running backs and how the top 12 finishes seemed pretty random, but this week with the wide receivers, I think this is different. There's a couple of names that maybe shock you, but the rest seems pretty much the people I'd expect to finish in the top 12. Do you guys sort of agree with that? Is this quite a standard top 12 to you? We'll come to you first, Ali.
Yes and no. I think it's going to be like this pretty much most seasons, especially for wide receivers. And I think the cream rises to the top at that position. There's a few less injuries than there are with the running back, so the same sort of names crop up there. A few that had disappointing seasons that just missed out, and there's certainly some surprises in the mix as well. But for the whole, it pretty much went as I expected.
Yeah, Hannah, do you agree? Do you agree that it was a bit
yeah,
short?
I mean, I think for me, the names are pretty much there. It's just the order that's maybe a bit different to, how ADP had them. And I think, injuries was some of that, some more kind of surprise performances, elevating people above others, all of that kind of thing. But yeah, I mean, ultimately, roughly the names that you could reel off as considered to be the elite wide receivers were in there somewhere.
Yeah.
I mean, there's one name that people weren't really expecting before the season.
Nico Collins. Nico Collins, yeah.
Nico Collins is one of them, but like I think Puka's the big one.
God,
that like we've all got. Okay, fine. We can carry on. I'll talk about it later.
We don't hear Hannah going on about Jamar Chase, do we? But no, we've got to listen to you talk about Puka Nacua again.
Yeah, finished higher this year.
What I would say about that is obviously it was a massive surprise, but it's really not the standard. Like, this is very unusual that a player like that would totally come from absolutely nowhere to enter the top 12. So You know, I think although it's super exciting that he was there, and of course nobody expected him to be there, I like chasing a player like that next season. I think ultimately will lead to disappointment.
Yeah.
You know, I think again people have this like mentality, oh, the 2023 season X happened, so therefore it must happen again in 2024, and then they're going to go and pick all of these random rookies and think that they're going to be in the top 12, you know, and it's just not going to happen. So I think generally as like a takeaway, like Puka is an awesome story, but I don't expect a player like that to be in the top 12 every season.
Yeah,
I
it's
100% agree with you. 100% agree.
yeah, it's becoming really interesting with the way that people are now looking both at rookie drafts and at the combine, and that rookie drafts people are going, you know, don't send away your 3rd and 4th round picks because last year you got Puka, the Porter, Tank Dell, but like the odds of them hitting is still next to nothing. It just so happened they did this year, and then with the combine, because Puka had a pretty poor combine last year, but it was actually like the in-game speed tracking data that showed that was what the Rams used. And people are going, well, like, okay, well, what can we learn from this to get the next Puka? And I've been saying to people that I'm like, nothing. Absolutely nothing. Like the Rams didn't draft Puka thinking he was this. If you watch the videos of them drafting him, they say like, I think this is someone that can really develop into like a solid role player for us. Like I think he blocks really well. I think he's strong. I think he's faster than he showed at the combine. Like the conversation wasn't like, guys, we're going to get the like one of the best wide receivers in the NFL in the 5th round. I can't believe no one else has noticed. Like there's not really anything you can learn from Puka, and I think people are going to try to next year and overdraft a lot of late round picks.
100. I can't wait to see like when the rookie drafts start and people literally going, oh yeah, I've got him in the 4th, he's going to be phenomenal. And you know how many we've all been playing Dynasty for so long now, and how many times have you done a rookie draft and you've gone, oh my god, he's fallen to me at like 107, I'm going to take him, and you go, great, he was garbage, thanks for that. You know what I mean? And we're talking, this is a 1st round pick that everyone's really high on. You know, I'm trying to think of somebody off the top of my head that's not in jail.
Quentin Johnson. Quentin
But yeah,
Johnson.
Quentin Johnson. I'm trying to think of the guy that went to the Patriots.
Jameson Williams. Oh, Keishon Butte.
And Kill Harry.
N'Keal Harry, that's
yeah.
the one. You know, everyone was going mad about N'Keal Harry, and they were going, "Oh my god, he's like, you know, he was an early 1st round rookie pick."
Yeah,
nothing, absolutely nothing. And like Puka is just he's so random. Like, and I don't expect anyone that goes later than the 1st round to do anything near to what he's done this year. I don't even, you know, I'd like to say that Marvin Harris Jr. could have the sort of same season and finish that high, but I don't know if he's going to do it. You know, it depends on landing spot and everything like that. But if he's going to have a season, because he broke all the records, didn't he? He's had the best rookie season of a wide receiver ever. And it's like, I don't expect to see that again this year, but people are going to go mad for it. Absolutely insane for it. But yeah, let's move on to another thing I want to chat about. Lewis, you and I spoke last week about strategies and how we fade the running back and stuff like that. So I just want to have a quick chat about strategies with you guys. I suppose this is more for Ali and Hannah to get their point. Do you guys prefer to build your team around these wide receivers that you can sort of say they're going to finish as a top 12 wide receiver? We know where we are with them guys. Dynasty redraft, are you still guys that like to prefer to build your team around wide receivers, or are you more QBs, or what do you fancy? Ali, let's come to you first.
I was going to go to Hannah because she's currently in a startup draft, so I was going to pick her brains about
so much more sense
about her strategy.
Hannah, let's go to you. Let's talk about the draft that you're in now. What's your draft strategy now? Ask us 3 who to pick for you, or
yeah, I mean that's basically my round 10 draft strategy, which thankfully you've sorted me out, so that saves me a job. Look, for me in Dynasty, I really struggle to draft running backs in the early rounds because, in my opinion, you know, they lose value. To be honest, they're a bit like a car, right? A new car. As soon as you drive it out of the showroom, it's lost value. And that's how a running back kind of feels like. you know, as soon as you draft them, they're basically losing value pretty much until they have no value left at all. I mean, yes, a couple of them, CMC has held value for a reasonable length of time, and Bijan probably will if he doesn't get injured and actually performs as we hope he does or should. But generally, I just find that they lose their value so quickly. I struggle to spend that draft capital on them. I prefer to draft running back. Yeah, I prefer to draft wide receivers than running backs. So then I always end up with the dregs from a startup, you know, in Dynasty in the running back position. But, you know, ultimately, I think you can kind of duct tape the running back position together a bit easier because, like we said last week, you know, it can be very random as to who ends up in the top 12 each season. So kind of taking punts on these backup guys or guys where there's like an uncertain kind of situation is probably the way to go with that position, where it's much harder with wide receivers. Like as soon as you know, get through the top, you know, 24, it's a bit more of a jumble, and it's very unlikely that they're going to end up in the top 12. I know Puka, you know, is the exception, but, you know, a lot of these other guys, if there's an injury to the wide receiver 1, the wide receiver 3 is not suddenly going to like take all of his target share. You know, they're just going to spread it around more. So I just feel like you can kind of get your running backs much easier in the later rounds, and then obviously draft all your wide receivers, you know, in the early rounds. That's why I prefer Dynasty. Now, redraft, I'm probably a little bit more conservative. I'm not a total zero running back person. I like to have a kind of decent-ish running back, at least in my running back 1 spot. Now, I try not to draft in the dead zone because I think that's just a waste of time. But these uncertain situations, or like if I was in the 103 or whatever last season, then I'd probably get a CMC. You know, I would still, not always, but I would still try and get decent-ish running backs in there. But I'm less kind of cautious in Dynasty because I know that trading is much easier and more freely available, whereas I find people are very reluctant to trade in redraft. So it makes it difficult if you haven't got, you know, your guy. Obviously there's waivers and stuff, but I do usually like to try and get a guy that I think is going to be, you don't really have as many workhorse roles, but, you know, who's going to have a decent role within their kind of team. So yeah, I'm a bit more cautious in redraft, if I'm honest.
Ali, anything to add to that, or has Hannah summed it up beautifully?
I mean, word for word, probably what I was going to say. But no, I mean, my perfect strategy for, say, Dynasty startups would be secure the elite quarterback would be round 1. Round 2 is certainly more flexible, whether I go from the quarterback 2 or my stud wide receiver. And then at the minute, there's 7 running backs that I feel comfortable with in Dynasty. So from Breece Hall at RB1 down to Kyron Williams at RB7. Travis Etienne is my RB8, who I'm not 100% secure on, but if I can get one of those in, say, round 3, so it'd be Kyron, Devon A-Chain, Jonathan Taylor, something like that, then I can really punt the position and I just hammer a wide receiver. So I've filled all my starting slots with wide receiver. And then later on in the draft, I just absolutely hammer backup running backs because you only need 1 or 2 of those to fill in each week. Or if a starting running back goes down to injury, they get cast into that role. And as Hannah mentioned, they can be fantasy gold for a few weeks, and you can either sell them or they could be useful for fantasy points. So that's the strategy. It's definitely built around wide receivers. It tends to be the trend. Also, if going back to say looking at theory, you don't always have to take the players that you like. So I quite like taking wide receivers, especially at the minute, because they're the new hotness. Go for what the community likes, because even if you don't want to start them, you can always trade them for higher than, say, a player that you like that only 2 or 3 players in your league also like. So that's sort of another strategy later on. But I'm definitely sort of in the same boat with Hannah, as I really like wide receivers. I end up with pretty crap at running back, so I'm sometimes scrounging around. But sometimes that running back 2 spot is easy to fill with sort of players that can have 10, 12 touches a game.
Yeah, I tend to feel that all my dynasty teams have pretty much the same running backs. Like like everything's different for wide receivers, but if you leave the running back position, you always find there's always then people later on that you're like, oh yeah, I'm quite happy to have him, and then I look at and then I end up having loads of that share of player, and it's just like, oh, I need to mix it up with the running backs and hope one of them hits, like, you know.
That's completely fair, but then like I'm exactly the same, and I have like James Cook and Raheem Mostert everywhere. So like, so long as if you pick the same ones consistently, but you hit consistently, then it's fine.
Yeah. So I didn't. So I listened to a guy talk on his. He does a. Oh, what's it called? Oh, the Dynasty Hot Seat. I listened to him say that Dwayne McBride was going to be a big thing, and he loved him pre-combine. He loved him after the combine. He loved him everything. He was he's going to be amazing. So my most owned player in Dynasty is Dwayne McBride. I have so much Dwayne McBride, is unreal, and he did nothing, absolutely nothing. So I didn't hit with him. You know, anyone else would have been fine, but Dwayne McBride, no, nothing. But yeah, so last week I teased a big question. Now this question was it was actually tweeted out by, I think it was Kyle Yates. Is it Kyle Yates? He tweeted it out, and it sparked a massive debate in one of my dynasty leagues. It sparked a massive debate in my home dynasty league, and my answer, I was criticized by my answer and everything like this. But the question was, who would you rather in dynasty? Marvin Harris Jr., or Marvin Harris' son Jr., sorry, or Puka Nakua. So, Lewis, we'll come to you. Which one of them two would you rather in Dynasty?
Sorry, Marvin Harrison Jr. I've seen this as well about like, should you be trading Puka for the 101? Because the best case scenario for Marvin Harrison Jr. is that he does what Puka did last year. I think the thing for me is like, it's very hard it takes a bit of time to get over your initial impression of a player. Is my camera doing that strange thing for you guys as well?
100%. Paranormal activity going on there. Because you picked Marvin Harrison Jr. over your guy Puka. The spirit will come for you.
Yeah, it's actually I actually have I work in the Rams building, so the moment I started talking out about a Rams player, they cut me off. No, like for Marvin Harrison Jr., like it's very difficult to adapt to when a player is truly elite when they are a lower rookie pick coming out. So it takes a while with Puka to go, okay, yeah, no, this actually is someone that we need to be getting as an elite player. Marvin Harrison Jr., we know he's going to be like, he's probably the best rookie wide receiver since maybe Julio Jones. So like I would take it straight. I would take Marvin Harrison straight up, but like I take Puka over any other wide receiver in this class.
Do you guys agree, Marvin Harrison Jr.? Or is anyone going to throw in Puka there?
No, I totally agree. And I mean, if I was to bet who was going to outscore the other in 2024, I'd probably go Puka, just because we don't know where Marvin Harrison's going to go. He could potentially have a really naff quarterback in Arizona. That's a joke. But obviously, if he lands on the Cardinals, that his value is going to be amazing. And I also think if he was to have a pretty poor year one, say Jackson Smith and Jigba, that type of level, then there's going to be excuses. There's going to be, oh, it's the quarterback play, or there's going to be some excuses. And his value is very much insulated for the next 2 to 3 years with his draft capital, blah, 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 and his talent. Whereas if Puka now has a bad season, people are going to question, is he a one-year wonder? And his value is going to plummet. So I just think with Marvin Harrison, you've got so much more insulated value. So I'd definitely be taking him.
Yeah, Hannah, do you agree? Is it a full house? We're all Marvin Harris Juniors?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the thing is, it's not about the player, is it? Ultimately, in Dynasty, I think people forget they're like, oh, I really like Puka, and I think he's going to be great. But actually, really, you shouldn't be thinking about the player. You should be thinking about his value in Dynasty. Like, what is the market going to value the player at? And like Ali said, if the player has a good season, how will the market value them? And if the player has a bad season, how will the market value them? And ultimately, like Ali said, no matter kind of what Marvin Harrison Jr. does, I think it's unlikely that his value is going to fall dramatically after his first season, where obviously Puka, his range of outcomes, if he has a bad season, is much wider, you know, and people will probably go, oh, well, he was a 5th round pick anyway. So, you know, or whatever 3rd round pick in my rookie draft, you know, he will plummet. So it actually kind of doesn't really matter what either player does. You know, it's more about their value, isn't it, ultimately, and how people are going to see them, perceive them. And sometimes I think people forget that. They're like, oh, I love this player, therefore he should be worth a high 1st round pick because I think he's great. I'm like, well, just because you think he's great doesn't mean that everyone else does, and, you know, will want to buy them for that.
Yeah, I get at least 2 trades a week from people that go, oh yeah, I want to sell this guy for a 1st. And I'm like, he's not worth a 1st. He's like, oh, he's definitely worth a 1st. If you've got to convince me he's worth a 1st, he's not worth a 1st. Okay. But yeah, so I was criticized because I basically went Marvin Harrison Jr. and I went, it's not even close in my opinion. You know, I think Puka is a phenomenal wide receiver, but like you said, his range of outcomes this year is so wide that anything can happen. You know, I'm trying to think back a couple of years back when Juju, do you remember Juju, his first year, where he was absolutely electric? Then, you know, people were talking about him as the wide receiver 1 and everything like this, and he's amazing, he's incredible, he's a young talent, everything like this, and he's done nothing ever since. You know, I'm not saying that's the level where Puka is, but if he has a season like this, all of a sudden you go in, he's not even a top 12 wide receiver. You know, he was a 1-year wonder and stuff like that. So it was just interesting on how many people criticized me because I basically went, it's Marvin Harrison Jr. for me, and it's not even close. You know, it's a lot of people criticize me for that, but Lewis has left us because he went against the Rams and they've obviously cut off his internet. He has said he's going to try and come back. But with that, we'll get into the finally 37 minutes in. We will talk about the top 12 wide receivers. So the top 12 wide receivers finished as such. It was CD Lamb was 1 with 403.2 points. Tyreek Hill was 2 with 376.4. Amon-Ra St. Brown 3rd with 330.9. Puka Nacua 4th with 298.5. AJ Brown was 5th, 289.6. DJ Moore was 6th with 286.5. Mike Evans was 7th with 282.5. Keenan Allen was 8th with 278.9. Stephon Diggs was 9th, 273.8. Devontae Adams was 10th, 265.4. Jamar Chase was 11th, 262.7. And finishing off the top 12 was Nico Collins with 260.4. Oh, that's really hard to say with all the numbers in there and stuff. Yeah, it's quite difficult. So
great work.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. So to you guys, which wide receiver in the top 12 is the biggest surprise? Now, I'm going to say we're not going to talk
don't
about
let Lewis
Puka.
back in yet. Don't let Lewis back in yet.
We're
We don't need to talk about Puka again.
I'm going to say
we've talked about him.
We're not going to talk about Puka now because we spoke about him quite a lot. So take Puka out of the equation. In this top 12, who was a standout to you? Who's the biggest surprise to you, Ali, in this top 12?
So biggest surprise to me is not actually someone that's in the top 12. It's just where he finished in the top 12. So I'm going to pick CD Lamb, finished at number 1, wide receiver 1. And the biggest surprise why I'm saying this is just because of what it looked like halfway through the season. So the Cowboys had a week 7 bye. And at the week 7 bye, CD Lamb was wide receiver 13. His highest game, he had 25.3 PPR points, and he was averaging 14.9 PPR points per game. Fast forward to after the bye, and he went absolutely bonkers, where he was averaging about, I think it was over 30 points per game, which is, for a quarterback, would be insane stats. But the fact that he's a wide receiver is just mental. It didn't look like he was going to do this over the first half of the season, but they changed offense, and he absolutely benefited from it. He was an absolute target hog. That offense was brilliant. They were just running up points on teams, and they were throwing an absolute ton. So to the detriment of Tony Pollard, but for Dak and for CD, they were really the cheat codes for fantasy this year. If you had that stack, you more than likely would have won your championship, won your league if you had those two. So that would be not because he's in the top 12, just because he finished wide receiver 1 by such a margin. 403 points is just an insane total. And the fact that it just didn't look like that at the start, sort of halfway through the season. So that's my biggest surprise.
Yeah, I had CD Lamb and the Dak stack in the JTT Cup, and it took me to a certain point in that competition, and then I was just looking now, and I think it was week 15 where he finished as wide receiver 16 and stuff like that, and I think that was the week where I eventually got knocked out and just missed making it through that part of the playoffs. So I would have loved to have had them take me all the way, but I have to agree with you that yes, it from that bye week, it was so nice to watch when you've got both of them players. But if you came up against both them players, it was horrendous. It was awful because it did feel like a bit of a cheat code for them too. But yeah, it's nice to have you come on and say that the biggest surprise is the wide receiver 1. I love that. So Hannah, who was the biggest shock to you in this top 12?
I mean, look, realistically, apart from Puka, it has to be Nico, right? Because, you know, coming into this season, we had no idea that CJ Stroud was going to do what he did. You know, the seasons before, I think the Texans had been pretty much irrelevant, hadn't they? And to be honest, the laughing stock, they had a rotating turnstile of head coaches. You know, it was just a complete mess. Voldemort obviously kicked it all off and then went to the Browns. And so I just don't think we expected this. And I think there'd been quite a few seasons where people were like, oh, Nico's a sleeper, Nico's a sleeper, you know, and it just hadn't really happened. And then ultimately Stroud came and we saw what Nico and Tank Dell did, you know, with Stroud. So I think, you know, if at the start of the season, if someone had said to us, oh, Nico Collins was a top 12 wide receiver, you know, you could kind of conceive it in a way, but kind of not, if you know what I mean. Like, no way would we have ever said Nico Collins is going to be top 12. But if someone said, oh, actually, the Texans offense was wild and he became top 12, then you probably wouldn't be surprised. But, you know, like I say, in September, I wouldn't have put Nico as wide receiver 12.
No,
personally.
not at all. Not at all. Lewis, without talking about Puka, who was a shock to you in this top 12?
I think the big one to me comes down to both off-season narrative and also then like how it felt during the season, and it's DJ Moore. That I think so. DJ Moore finished in the top 12 for the first time ever. He'd kind of had this perennial finishing as a decent wide receiver 2. So his last 5 seasons in Carolina, wide receiver 22, 19, 20, 18. And people thought he didn't really have that upside. And then obviously was moving to Justin Fields as well, that while he was a bit of an off-season hype candidate, there were a lot of reasons to not like the passing volume and not think it would work out for DJ Moore. And so that was then a surprise. But the finish at wide receiver 6, now obviously he had the huge blow-up game in week 5 against the Commanders where he had 230 yards and 3 touchdowns. But if you actually look at the season, he was so incredibly boom bust. So he had 6 games inside the top 10 and then 5 games outside the top 42, including 2 finishes in the 70s, one of those being week 1. So I think that's part of the reason that like having DJ Moore in your roster didn't feel like you were starting the wide receiver 6 every single week. And the points per game doesn't really tell the story because he finished quite high in points per game as well. But that's because he either exploded or laid an absolute goose egg and did absolutely nothing. So it was a weird one in terms of it was a surprise to see him that high because with the DJ Moore shares that I have, it never really felt like that was what was happening.
Yeah. Completely.
I was
agree with you.
sorry, Paul. I'm going to butt in 2 secs, but I
No,
always
you
find,
carry on. You carry on.
Yeah, Will, Paul. Thanks. I'll ignore you and just carry on. But this is where I find it really interesting, right? Because in the off season or whatever, when the season finished, we always review players in terms of total points and points per game. But ultimately, for some of these players, that never tells the full story. And like you said, Lewis, amazing when he, was booming. He won you your week, but ultimately there were weeks that he lost you your week.
Mhm.
And so, like, when we review it and someone goes, DJ Moore, he finished wide receiver 6, I'm going to draft him really high next season, and then expect him to be a wide receiver 1 every week, potentially are going to be disappointed, because if he continues to be boom bust like this, obviously we don't know what's going to happen. His, I suppose, 2024 outlook is probably quite different because we don't know what quarterback is going to have. Let's say he was still with Justin Fields, ultimately there's a chance that he's but you're actually disappointed, even like some weeks he's winning your week. But some weeks he's totally going to lose you a week. So I do think in some ways, like, Jerry as a fantasy community, the way that we review players' seasons is not like ideal, because we're missing out on a lot of, it is a weekly game at the end of the day. Great, in points per game he was 16.1 or whatever, but that's actually not accurate over every week of the season. So I think we're missing a trick somewhere here, where we need to kind of analyze them a little bit differently and a bit better, so that we can give people the full picture as to what they should expect when they draft this player. It's like George Kittle. He either rings you your week or he scores 1. And like, great if I've got him in best ball, but when I've got to start him in redraft every week, I dare not start him because he might go off. But 9 times out of 10, he's probably going to lose me a week. There's somewhere I do think that we need to kind of try and fit these players in so that we can analyze them a bit better.
Yeah, when you were talking, then I was literally waiting for you to finish, and I was going to go, are you going to put him in the same category as George Kittle? Because your love for George Kittle is crazy,
I hate him in redraft, hate him with a passion. I have him in one of my redraft leagues and I hate it.
So to follow on to that, would you draft DJ Moore in redraft?
Depends
knowing
where
that he's a bit up and down.
Because we always say, it's all about ADP, isn't it? Depends where he is. I suspect not, because I suspect that ADP is going to be higher than I like him to be, because people are saying, we were finished as wide receiver 6 last season, and they're going to draft him, highly. So probably not, no.
Completely
And I might
agree.
lose out here because he might be more consistent this year. But potentially he's with a rookie, so he might not.
Caleb Williams, though.
Well, yeah, but I mean, you could say that about who knows what Caleb Williams is going to be in the NFL. This is another one where CJ Stroud is getting people to think that rookies are going to be amazing the minute they step on the field for fantasy, which we know is not always the case.
Love it. Love it. Before we move on, I will mention a guy who I think is a bit of a shock, and it's not a shock that he's in the top 12. It's a shock that where he finished, because that's Jamar Chase, and that's somebody that you'd have drafted really early, expected him to finish high, where ultimately he's snuck in as the wide receiver 11 on the end of the season. It's to me, he's a bit lower than what you'd expect for somebody like that. Obviously there is another guy who didn't make it in the top 12. We may speak about him in a minute, but to me, I think it's a bit of a shock about where he finished more than anything, and that's Jamar Chase. So guys, let's talk about wide receivers. I know I've just done. Wide receivers finished lower than expected in 2023, lower in the top 12, or even missed the top 12. Ali, is there somebody that you think finished lower than the top 12, or it didn't even make it in the top 12 that was a bit of a shock?
It's difficult to say, because the players that just missed again are ones that I'd probably expect to be in and around there. But the one I'm gonna pick a guy who finished at wide receiver 34 that I think is being hyped up a bit too much. Jalen Waddle finished at wide receiver 34, which is very disappointing given his ADP, given how high he's ranked in Dynasty. Given the fact that the Miami Dolphins offense is so explosive, put up 70 points on Denver. Probably did score the most points on offense. I can't remember who it was this year, but just the fact that he was wide receiver 30, was it 33, 34, I think only averaging 14.2 points per game. And really, when you look, there's one game he scored 28 points, but the rest are just, there's a lot of down games, 6.2, 8.4, 8.6. Really, really disappointing for someone that we thought was going to come through and take the mantle from Tyreek Hill and be that next, which he could still be. He's got the talent to do that. But just the fact that they scored so many points, they didn't really have a really good tight end to take targets away. And just for him to finish wide receiver 34 is really, really disappointing, because you expect to see him pushing at least a wide receiver 2.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. Hannah, it's come to you now.
I think the thing is that there's a few, obviously you can say Justin Jefferson, I think you can say Garrett Wilson, but I kind of feel like it's a bit of a cop-out, really, because the scenarios that we thought that they were going to be in at the start of the season actually ended up being different. So obviously Garrett Wilson, we're expecting him to be with Aaron Rodgers, who, ruptured his Achilles within the 4th play of the season, and that was the end of that, and ultimately he was stuck with Zach Wilson again, and we all know how that goes. So I think even if he'd have been with Aaron Rodgers, I would have expected him to be in the top 12. And ultimately he wasn't. And obviously Justin Jefferson was injured. It's same with Jamar Chase. Like, ultimately, yes, he finished as wide receiver 11, but does that stop me drafting him within the top 5 wide receivers this year? Certainly not, because, it actually wasn't his fault that he was wide receiver 11. We didn't have Joe Burrow for most of the season, and when we did, he couldn't move. So, you can't really expect Chase to be wide receiver 1 or 2 when your QB can't play how he should be, and then you haven't got him for the rest of the season. So, I'm surprised that they're all not there, but I can understand why they're all not there, and I can see why people would draft them where they were drafting them last season again, because, it was all kind of situation rather than performance-based.
Yeah, 100%. Lewis, any wide receiver finished lower than expected in 2023 for you?
Yeah, so the one that I wanted to talk about is someone that still finished within the top 12, Stephon Diggs. And I actually wrote an article about Stephon Diggs on the website, looking at basically the tale of the 2 halves of his season. And the reason why I'm surprised, why it's a shock that he didn't finish any higher, is because through the first 9 games of the season, he finished as a wide receiver 1 6 times. So, through the first 9 games, he was an absolute league winner. He was incredible. And then it was weeks 10 to 17, he had 6 weeks with less than 9 PPR points and only finished in the top 40 once. And if you look into the kind of 17-game pace of the 2 halves of each season, if he'd carried on the pace that he'd started in the first 9 weeks, he would have finished at wide receiver 3. If you extrapolate the last 8 games of the season to a 17-game pace, he would have finished at wide receiver 46. So I think that's why it's interesting to me to say, yeah, he still finishes wide receiver 9. And like you were saying earlier, Hannah, about kind of what's actually the tail of the season, because he started off on pace for 1,500 yards and double-digit touchdowns, and then he finished on pace for 636 yards and 2 touchdowns. And it was really kind of split after they changed offensive coordinator in week 10 and started to run the ball more, and also Khalil Shakir started to break out a little bit. So for me, it was he still finishes as a top 12 wide receiver, but given how it started, he should have ended up way higher up that list.
Yeah, definitely. Go on, Hannah. You want to talk again?
No, I know we haven't got much time, but Stephon Diggs is a guy that I'm super interested in, because how are we going to view him now for the 2024 season? Why do you guys think Stephon Diggs kind of dropped off on the second half of the season? They didn't seem to be targeting him as much. Do we think he had an injury? Do you think he's kind of pissed off with the Bills and they're, kind of responding? What's going to happen in 2024? Can we confidently draft him in the top 12 like we did last season, or should we be more cautious at this point?
I'm quite happy to talk through this one a little bit, because I did a big deep dive into Diggs, and basically I would love it to come out that he was injured, because if an injury comes out that we hadn't really heard about, then that would explain a lot of the drop off, and that would be fantastic. If there was some kind of, you know, some sort of fracture that he has treated in this offseason. But basically, it seems like they fired Ken Dorsey, they hired Joe Brady, they diversified the run scheme, and they didn't use Diggs in the same way. Now, his cap hit in next season is 27.8 million, but cutting or trading him before the start of the new league year would be a 31 million dead cap hit. So he's going to be Josh Allen's wide receiver one. The question is then how that's actually going to look, especially if they target a wide receiver in the draft. So he's probably going to be the alpha in the offense until 2025, unless the decline in his play indicates that he no longer warrants being the alpha anymore. So we can't really explain the half season of bad play currently, but there's a world in which he's just washed. We want it to come out that he's injured, basically.
Yeah, because ultimately, like, what does Josh Allen's alpha look like in 2024? Like,
Dalton Kincaid.
but does it look like where would you draft? You know, if you were drafting for 2024, let's say a redraft league in 2024, you know, at this point, where would you be comfortable drafting Diggs? You know, in like a wide receiver rankings style, where would you be willing to take him?
So I'm going to jump in here. I think I'd comfortably take him as maybe a wide receiver 2. I don't think I'd want him to be my wide receiver 1. I think there's too much risk in that. If he could fall to me as a wide receiver 2, then I think I'd be comfortable to take that risk with him, because his upside is a wide receiver 1, and then I've got 2 wide receiver 1s for that value. So I think I'd be comfortable if he was my wide receiver 2, but I feel like there's a lot of risk with him this year.
I don't think you need to draft him as a wide receiver 1. I don't think he'll go in the top 12 wide receiver picks anyway, because recency bias is absolutely massive in fantasy, and people are going to be scared off that second half of the season and that continuation of perhaps the running game. And we saw James Cook come on. So if he's your wide receiver 2, I think that is a really good position to be in, because of the upside is there. I'll definitely take that risk.
Lewis, do you want to add to that, or do you agree with the 2 wise men on here?
I agree, really. I think I'd be quite happy taking him around the kind of wide receiver 15 to 20 range. And I also wouldn't be surprised if he comes out and repeats as a top 12 wide receiver next year. But I agree with Ali that, like, I don't think he'll have to. I think people see a bad half season from a player over 30 or approaching 30 and go, right, that's it, dead, completely done, finished. And there's a really solid tier of older wide receivers that I'm not including Tyreek in anymore, because he's kind of in a tier of his own. But Devontae Adams, Cooper Kupp, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Keenan Allen, that, like, I'm really happy with as my wide receiver 2, even if they probably don't have top 5 upside.
Completely agree. But yeah, we'll move on and we'll move on to the points per game bit. As we know, fantasy is a weekly game, so I think it's good to point out that what people are scoring on average. So the top 12 for fantasy points per game are CD with 23.7, Tyreek with 23.5, Keenan Allen with 21.5, Amon-Ra St. Brown with 20.7, Justin Jefferson 20.2, Puka Nacua 17.6, Nico Collins 17.4, AJ Brown was 17, DJ Moore 16.9, Mike Williams, legend, was 16.7, Mike Evans was 16.6, and Jamar Chase was 16.4. Guys, are there any surprises on this list? Ali, we'll come to you first.
So I cannot mention Mike Evans, probably banned from mentioning Mike Evans. So I'll go for someone that averaged 5 points per game more than him in Keenan Allen, 21.5. I think for most part of the season, he was surprising to me, and just how big a upside that he showed and how good that he looked with Herbert. The Chargers offense wasn't amazing, but you could always rely on Keenan Allen picking up them points. He's amazing in points in PPR formats. And he really did help you win the championship. He maybe petered off a bit towards the end, but throughout the season, he was absolutely fantastic. And 21.5 to be the wide receiver 3 is just it's elite, and for him to still be contributing at age 30 or whatever he is now, that's probably my biggest surprise on the list.
Yeah, and I think that Chargers offense is just going to get better next year as well. Lewis, who do you think was a bit of a shock in this list?
The other Chargers wide receiver and my absolute guy as well, Mike Williams, who I can never give up. I mean, Mike Williams played 3 games last year, so seeing him that high, the sample size is so small. But the point is with Mike Williams, like the season before, he had 5 finishes inside the top 5. Inside the top 15 wide receivers, despite the fact that he missed 5 games. The problem is it's just the inconsistency with him, and he can never stay healthy because he loves throwing himself on the ground. And I think it's likely that he's a free agent this offseason. I think it's likely he gets cut. So I think he could be a really interesting piece. I really like him either in Buffalo or Tennessee. If you put him with a strong arm quarterback that can find him deep down the field, I think he could be interesting. And I'll continue to draft him, and he'll continue to get injured.
He's going to be a late round flyer, isn't he? He's not even signed for a team. You'll be like, I'm taking Mike Williams because he'll be somewhere doing something at some point before he gets injured. Had there any shock to you in this top 12?
I mean, I think we've spoken about most of them, haven't we? Look, Ali mentioned him. Mike Evans, like realistically, we haven't really spoken to him. Obviously, we spoke about him at the beginning of the show because of the big breaking news. But, I don't think anyone who drafted him in 2023 expected him to finish in the top 12. Everyone thought, oh, he's got Baker. We know how terrible Baker was in Carolina last season. And a lot of people were touting Chris Godwin as the wide receiver 1 on that team now. And I think ultimately he was going very close to, if not after, Chris Godwin in ADP last season. So I think a lot of people thought he was washed and that Baker was not going to get the ball to him. So I think everyone was pretty surprised at how much of a connection they had and how well ultimately they performed for fantasy last season. So Evans does have to be a surprise. Yeah,
I'm not going to talk about any of the others because I think they're all pretty standard to be there, and we spoke enough about Puka Nacua. So I will move on to one more question that I have for you all, and that is, who is your dark horse to break out the wide receiver position next season? Ali, I'm going to throw you on the spot here. Who's your wide receiver that's going to break out next year?
So it might be rather similar to Lewis's take with Mike Williams and not being able to give up this person, but I've still got a faith in Jahan Dotson breaking out, especially thinking about who he's just played with. Yep, Sam Howell, there was plenty of targets. He was throwing the ball a ton, but they weren't really on target, bless him. They're going to get a quarterback upgrade. It's looking like it could be Drake May at pick 2. If that's the case, then I'm going to be very excited for Jahan Dotson, who's someone that I really, really like. I've got a ton of him in Dynasty. Obviously, you've got Terry McLaurin, who a lot of people, year in, year out, he's really pretty good. He's sort of DJ Moore level. He always produces nearly 1,000 yards, sort of 7 or 8 touchdowns, but he's not broke through. He's a little bit older. I really like Jahan Dotson. So he's someone that at the minute, Keep Trade Cutter got him at wide receiver 50. So I think I really like that. And someone that is going to get a big quarterback upgrade. So if you want to go after someone like that, you need to dive in now, because once they've got that quarterback like a Drake May who's got elite traits, then the two could hit it off and hopefully his value could start to rise.
Love it. Lewis?
I actually really debated putting Jahan Dotson on here because it's another player that I really like as well. So I'm glad I didn't. I actually went with a Cardinal. So I went with Michael Wilson. Michael Wilson, who was the 3rd round pick last year out of Stanford. He finishes the wide receiver 60, so not fantastic. But he finished on the exact same points per game as JSN. 38 receptions for 565 yards and 3 touchdowns, which is fine for a rookie season. The crucial thing for me is that obviously Kyler's back, there's 185 vacated targets just from Zach Ertz and Marquise Brown. Now, obviously, MHJ's likely coming into town, so the majority of them should go to him. But to me, having a wide receiver 2 that works as a deep threat, he's an outside receiver. I think having someone that can attract double coverage is never a bad thing. And I think he can see, especially for best ball, can see some explosive games. And he was actually really solidly a really good deep play threat in 2023. So his yards per target were 15th in the NFL. His yards per reception were 26th, and he had 26 plays of more than 10 yards. So there are some numbers there that show you that he was quite efficient in terms of winning down the field. And yeah, he's not going to be a volume guy. But I think he can rise to be the wide receiver 2 in that offense, and we've been shown time and time again that 2 wide receivers from the same team can finish in the top 24. Would I bet money on him finishing in the top 24? Probably not. Do I think that he has a chance to break out next year? Definitely.
You're such a smart guy, Lewis. I love it. I love it. Hannah, do you want to throw a name at us?
Do you know what? I think this is quite tough, to be honest. There's not that many that I'm like, these deeper guys that I'm really massively into. But I do think, I'm not necessarily going to give, maybe I should give a name, but one of these Green Bay receivers is ultimately going to be finishing pretty highly next year. Who that's going to be, that I'm not entirely sure.
Put a name on it.
Which one?
Put a name on it.
Well, do you know what? I'm not confident on Christian Watson, I have to say. I think someone's gonna pull out from there. I think Jaden Reed is the most reliable guy, and I think he's probably the most he is the least risky, but I don't think he's got the upside personally as someone like Dontavian Wicks. I could see Dontavian Wicks coming out now and overtaking Romeo Doubs, and being like the wide receiver 2 on the outside, and ultimately being relatively reliable fantasy option. It might not happen. So ultimately, there's going to be a couple of these guys, I think, that are going to kind of shoot up, but I'm not entirely sure who it's going to be. But I think Dontavian Wicks certainly will be more of a fantasy producer than he was last year. And as I say, I think there's a chance that he becomes kind of better than Doubs and overtakes him there. So he finished as the wide receiver 58. Doubs was the wide receiver 36. Jaden Reed was the wide receiver 25. So I'm gonna say Wicks is gonna finish as the wide receiver 1 on Green Bay. I mean, that's a full on punt, that is, to be honest. But I think there's a chance. Do you think there's a chance?
I love it. I'm annoyed at it because I was going to say Jaden Reed, so I feel like I can't say him now.
Yeah, I think he's reliable, but has he got the upside? I'm not sure. I think one of these kind of other more deep threat type guys probably have a higher upside than he does, but I might be wrong.
Yeah. So I'll just be quick, and I will throw a name out there, somebody who I think takes a big step forward next year, and that's Rashee Rice out of the Kansas City. I think he really takes a step forward next year, and I think he's somebody that we could be talking about next year as somebody who finished inside the top 12. I think he's got that kind of upside to him.
Can I say something? I'm sorry.
We just want to finish the show, Hannah.
I know
we go for an hour and 8 minutes. I know we haven't been here the last couple of weeks.
I've seen Rashee Rice hanging around on the show sheet all night, waiting for someone to say something about him. But my concern with Rashee Rice is that another wide receiver is going to appear in this team. There's zero chances that they're not going to draft another wide receiver or, get a veteran. To me, I think it's likely that they get a veteran. I can't see Rashee Rice. If a veteran or someone else appears, I just don't see him being the wide receiver 1 that finishes in the top 12. I just don't. I think he's good at doing the dirty work, the underneathy stuff. But, I think if they've got other options, I personally don't see him as being a wide receiver 1.
So let me get this straight. Ali says his, you agree. Lewis says his, you agree. I said you steal mine, then I make up another one, and then you go, yeah, that's bullshit, Paul. I don't.
No, I saw it. I saw because you wouldn't shut up, Paul. We missed a whole segment out, and so
missed one question. But we've been
Yeah,
going
but I
for an
saw
hour
that
and 9
Lucy
minutes.
put Rashid Rice in as well, you see. And I wanted to just mention and discuss the chance that ultimately he isn't the only guy that they can turn to, and I think there's a chance that I personally think that people are well into him this offseason. I think he's going to be drafted as a borderline top 12 wide receiver, and I'm just not convinced that he's going to perform that way. I think he's a trap, personally, but obviously maybe I'm wrong. But
Tune in 12 months and find out who was
yeah,
trusted
and
and who wasn't.
when he's the wide receiver one, and everyone's laughing at me. But I just think people get way overexcited, and there's going to be other things. There's zero way that he's the only wide receiver on that team again next year. No way. They won the Super Bowl, but they know they only won it because they were lucky. They know that.
I wish we had Mags on right now,
But they were. They were super, super lucky to make it that far, and they know it.
You sound like a bitter Bengals fan, if I'm honest. With that brings us to the end of the show. Ali, thanks for coming on, mate. Please let everyone know where they can find you on X or any social medias.
Yeah, so just X at FF Dynasty Grill. I'm tweeting a lot of stuff out about the rookies. A lot of people are disagreeing with my takes on Brian Thomas Jr. being more impressive than Xavier Worthy. But yeah, other than that, the Fantasy Wildcard, the Dynasty show that we'll be dropping every Wednesday, we're talking about free agent wide receivers and tight ends. So, and perhaps not too much to talk about Mike Evans this week, but yeah, check out the show.
Amazing. I am going to be quite selfish, and I am going to plug the fact that I am doing the London Marathon this year. If you go to @Paul_Picking, my pinned tweet is a little message from me, what I'm doing, why I'm doing it, and the link to sponsor me. If you could spare anything, that's amazing. I'm just over halfway towards my target, and I've got just 6 weeks on Sunday to go. So if you could, that would be amazing. And with that, guys, that brings us to the end of this show. Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to subscribe and follow us on X @Wildcard Rewind, or head over to our YouTube channel and search for us at the Fantasy Wildcard. And make sure you give us a subscribe and tune in next week when we are talking tight ends. Can't wait for that.